Hey everyone!
Hola a todos!
This is Jahaira.
And this is Stephanie, and welcome to Cuento Crimen podcast.
Y aquí on the Cuento Crimen podcast, we are a true crime podcast and we bring a new case every Wednesday.
Cada miércoles.
And these are cases that don't get much media attention, so chances are you haven't heard of some of these cases.
And we cover these cases in Spanglish.
Así que agarra a tu abuelita, tu abuelito, tu mamá, tu papá, a quien tú gustes, and come join us every Wednesday for a new true crime case. Hoy vamos a hablar de Khalil Wheeler-Weaver and just a little background on him. And what are the odds, y'all? He was born on the exact same day as I was, which was April 20th, 1996. Legit, my birthday.
Literally the same birthday.
Yeah.
And also, I think this kind of reminds me of, like, I don't know if y'all seen, like, the post on social media of the data, pues, of serial killers and their zodiac signs. I don't know if you've seen that.
I think I have, yeah.
It's kind of interesting, but I don't recall what's the most common zodiac sign.
I feel like now I'm going to go look at that.
Mm-hmm.
No, I really want to know. Anyways, maybe I'll say it at the end of the episode. Who knows? Okay. So he was born on April 20th, 1996. Y él estaba viviendo in Orange, New Jersey, and committed his crimes in the communities around there. Interestingly, he came from a family that includes at least 2 law enforcement officers. Again, what are the odds? And at some point, he actually tried to follow into their footsteps. Él trabajaba como un security guard with Sterling Securities. Y esto fue todo lo que pudimos encontrar sobre su background, sobre su familia. It was pretty short, but this is all we got.
So yeah, that is the background on Khalil Wheeler-Weaver. And so now we're going to jump into how he was targeting young women. So first, we're going to talk about Robin West. But before we really get into it, we also like to include some background information on her. We read que she struggled in her childhood. She went through a lot of troubles. Sus papás la querían mucho. They loved her. But they were a divorced couple. And this happened cuando ella estaba muy chiquita. And she decided to stay with her mom, but she still, wanted to visit her dad more because, like, that's her dad. Pero no pudo hacer eso, like, visitarlo más until her teen years. Y Robin decía que, the separation did affect her. Y también leímos que, she grew up going to school, but, the divorce and her family problems did have an effect on her academics.
Y Robin también estaba tomando medicamento para her attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. So she had ADHD. And her parents creían que ella también tenía other mental health issues. So with that being said, Robin switched between both psychiatric placements and alternative education schools. And honestly, this must be really tough on a person, like, to be in both settings. And como hemos mencionado, like, Steph and I have background with special education, and I feel like you see a lot of things there. Ella que estaba aquí, que estaba allá, she probably saw and experienced a lot of things.
Sí, y también, like, the juggling between, I guess, resources also is, could take a toll on a student and their academics because, they're moving so much, trying to figure out what helps. And I think that does also add to it, Y con todo lo que estaba pasando, Robin no se pudo graduar de la escuela. And, life also got even more tough for her porque one of her closest friends passed away. Y esta persona, esta amiga, ella la consideraba como una segunda mamá. This person was just a family friend and her best friend, and also someone she called a second mom.
And so she began running away. Y la razón por qué ella se iba era porque she highly disliked causing trouble to her family. Entonces ella se iba para que su familia no miraran ese lado de ella, so they wouldn't see her struggling, so they wouldn't see the bad side of her. And she thought that by being away, she was saving her parents from that, instead of asking for help. But like always, there's always 2 sides to every story. And in reality, her running away was only hurting her parents a lot. And
yeah, that's kind of tough because, like, it's like I can see obviously she loves her family, right? She knows she's struggling. No quiere que vean eso. But I feel like it's almost, like you said, a double-edged sword because she's trying to protect her family from seeing her in that way. But her family wants to be a part of her life and help her
or
get
also,
through that.
Yeah, or like, I mean, solamente sabiendo que tu hija no está bien, but she's not around to help and you don't know how to help. That must also be a very, hard feeling.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I also want to say también, like, ella, choosing not to expose her family to her troubles, again, shows like how much she loves her family, what kind of person she is by trying to avoid giving them pain, pues, so that just a little bit like talks about her character.
Yeah. And so then eventually Robin decides to move out of her parents' house to avoid her little brother witnessing her troubles. And it's kind of like she was self-conscious. Like ella sabía que lo que estaba pasando no estaba bien. She knew and she wanted better for herself. But again, like it's hard when you're actually in that spot.
And from time to time, ella mencionaba que quería, volver a ir a la escuela and to graduate. So there was, some will of her and effort, in her that she wanted to get her life back on track. And, it's always hard to get things done. So the fact that she's saying she wants to, I do think it's a step, We also read that she found a lot of comfort in a church. And it seems like she, was making effort for self-improvement. She was aware and all. And, she was going through a lot, but making progress at the same time.
Es como dice mamá, there's a will, there's a way. And so now we're going to transition into Robin now living independently away from her parents. So la historia toma lugar cuando Robin West tenía 19 años y ella estaba viviendo con su amiga in West Philly. And she was the type to, do her own thing and disappear for a day or two. But obviously she wouldn't be gone for like a week or so, right? And so in the beginning, it was not different. And ellas se llevaban bien, but they were very independent from each other. And it was just a normal thing for her to be gone sometimes more than a day. But this occasion, Robin was gone for too long. And that's when her family began to worry.
And so the thing was that her birthday was coming up. And she was going to turn 20, and she was excited about that. Ella era una persona que le gustaba celebrar su cumpleaños, and everyone knew that she was ready to turn 20, and she even was so ready for it. She had a white lacy dress for her birthday, and she had even posted about it on Facebook. So she was definitely ready to celebrate her birthday.
I mean, if you post your outfit on a social media, that means you are ready to celebrate.
Yeah.
And, adult life is different for everyone and also hard for everyone on different levels. So at some point, también, Robin, to get financially through, she began working as an exotic dancer to make ends meet. And after that, it kind of escalated to a sex worker.
Leading up to her disappearance, she told her family that she would be in North Jersey to celebrate her birthday as an early birthday celebration. But during this trip, she stopped texting. Ella no estaba contestando su teléfono. And as we said earlier, days went by. She wasn't communicating with her roommate, her family, or anyone. And so after a week of not knowing anything, her family reported her missing. And unfortunately, no one knowing this report was made after her murder.
I feel like a lot of the times with cases, it's so hard to know the timeline because there's a lot of like overlaps. Like in this case, like we're not sure what the authorities did to look for her. We couldn't find much information in that regard, which kind of makes us think that maybe there wasn't much going on. Like, how sometimes we read about like búsquedas que están bien grandes and you have like all these volunteers, but it seemed like that wasn't the case for this. And so on September 1st, 2016, firefighters stopped a fire at an abandoned house in Orange, New Jersey. And inside they found a body that was burned. And the body was very severely burned that it was kind of impossible to identify if it was male or female or any details really just by looking at it. And so the body laid unidentified for almost 2 weeks before dental records confirmed that it was Robin.
And so 2 weeks after she went missing and they identified the body, that is when they notified the family that they found her.
So basically, it's kind of like Robin failed to come back home y es cuando su familia la reportó como desaparecida, right? Pero porque su cuerpo se tardó tanto para ser identified, that's why it took so long for the investigators to come back to that report and to tell the family that she was deceased.
Yeah, like kind of connecting the dots. They weren't able to do it because
they didn't know.
Yeah, they didn't know that, you know, they were talking about the same person kind of thing. And so like backtrack to the storyline. So the last time, you know, someone saw Robin, it was during the trip we mentioned earlier, the whole like early trip celebration. She was super excited about her birthday and she was going to go out and all of that. During this trip, Robin and her friend ran out of cash. And in order to get, you know, extra cash, they, you know, usually would go on online ads. So this was their first time working the streets to make extra money. And this is when a silver sedan came up to them and pointed at Robin.
And the friend actually says that they wrote down the license plate and that Robin never made it back. The friend también la reportó como desaparecida, pero dice que la policía casi no hizo nada. I don't know, it just kind of seemed like very dismissive to the case, kind of like, okay, you know, which is crazy and wild to me because she's really coming up to you saying, my friend never came back, alguien la recogió, aquí están las placas del carro, and you're not doing anything about it.
Yeah, and like this is frustrating porque ahora sabemos que hay two like missing reports for this person.
That is true, yeah.
And it's like, why aren't you working towards this? Like, and it's true. And I hate to say it. We ask ourselves, like, why? Like, what is the reason why they don't like look into this case, right? This is why we start talking about like their backgrounds and like occupations. And like, it's just really sad that it feels like departments pick and choose which cases they want to look into.
Right. And it should not be like that.
Yeah. And, you know, we kept researching and, you know, they did talk to this person that was, you know, driving this silver sedan and picked her up. So they were able to identify him maybe because of the license plates, right? And so they talked to him and the police identified this person as Khalil Wheeler-Weaver. And the police described him as calm and helpful. And supposedly, Khalil told detectives that he did meet up with Robin and that they went out for lunch and he dropped her off at an abandoned building in Orange, New Jersey.
Isn't it crazy how he's saying que la dejó en un edificio que estaba abandonado and her body was found in an abandoned building? And he even took them al edificio donde supuestamente él la había dejado. What a coincidence que estaba menos de 2 cuadras de donde el cuerpo de Robin fue encontrado. But at that point, como estamos diciendo, like, it's overlapping, right? So Robin's body has already been found, but it has not been identified yet. So as of right now, Robin is just considered missing.
But como habíamos dicho, the autopsy revealed that this was Robin through dental records.
La familia de Robin tenía esperanza de que ella estuviera bien. Entonces, cuando esta noticia llegó a ellos, they were devastated, to say the least. And the family also learned for the first time that their daughter Robin was actually a sex worker. And, you know, this is something that they were clueless of. And, you know, you can only imagine the articles that were written on her, the titles that these articles had. And basically, like, her occupation just was everywhere, right? And I think that sucks because at the end of the day, Robin was a person and Robin did not deserve to be murdered.
Yeah, I do think a lot of like articles try to have the most clickable headline, and it's not the headline. Like, what does the occupation have to do with what happened, right?
Yeah. Es como dice mamá, nomás para echarle crema a los tacos. But in this case, it's like you're being insensitive to the family.
Yeah, of course. Like, no family wants to see these kinds of headlines, you know?
Of course not. Y la mamá de Robin, Anita Mason, did ask for that respect. You know, she said that those titles were unnecessary and you're kind of dismissing the whole point of the case. And I 100% agree with her. And aside from that, the family also had doubts about this fact. They didn't 100% believe that Robin was a sex worker. But again, like, there was no way to prove if she was or if she wasn't.
Yeah. Robin's mother said in a quote, "She will forever be and is my middle child," end quote. And she also described a little bit more about Robin. Ella dice que a Robin le gustaba la música, le gustaba bailar, le gustaba cantar. Ella amaba a su familia y también she had a passion for little kids and elderly people, dogs, and all living things. And she was just that kind of person who just loved living and loved life. And also she said que she had this desire to join the Air Force. And yeah, the description that she has of her daughter is really great.
And I bet you that like most of these articles that were written on her, casi ninguna decía nada de estos. Nada de estos facts de ella. And at the end of the day, you know, like we said, like this mom lost her daughter and she now has to deal with grieving her daughter. And on top of that, reading all the comments that people were leaving, like unnecessary comments. And that's the thing, like, they're unnecessary, you know, like just move on. And it's not fair for those who judge through article titles and those commenting on it. Fact is, there's a young woman that was murdered. But back to the story. So the vacant property where Robin's body was found is just over a half mile from where Khalil Wheeler-Weaver lived with his mother. Y en este punto de la investigación, nadie había hecho la conexión entre la muerte de Robin y Khalil, because Khalil was questioned and he was brought into the station, but he was cleared and he was let go.
Yeah, I mean, like the detectives described him as helpful, like a quote unquote helpful witness, calm and collected. Entonces they like kind of like cleared him off and continued on with the investigation. And it wasn't until like later that they, you know, took a better look, right? Side note, we do want to include it here because this case is kind of a lot. It goes everywhere. It overlaps a bit. But later down the investigation, they proved que Khalil manejó a esta, you know, abandoned warehouse where Robin was found. He drove there and he just watched from outside his car, like the fire. Like he just sat there.
But at this point, again, he was not connected to the crime, and for a while, there was no progress in finding who was responsible for the murder of Robin West.
And in efforts to keep Robin West's memory alive, there is a scholarship in Robin's name at Frankfort High School, where it aims to give $500 each year to deserving students who maintain at least a 2.75 GPA and is involved in something positive. And I just think this is really sweet to keep her memory alive. And so that's the story on Robin West. We will talk a little bit more later on. But now are going to talk about Joanne Brown.
So this was a month later after Robin's disappearance. Entonces, Joanne Brown meets foul play. But before we jump into it, let's talk a bit about who she was. Entonces, ella era una de 8 hijos, so she did come from a big family. Y su familia de ella le tenían el apodo Billy Joe. She, again, also struggled with mental illness, so I feel like it's kind of a similarity between her and Robin. But nonetheless, she graduated high school. And during her adulthood, she was experiencing some difficulty.
So, you know, we tried to research as much as we could on her background y encontramos que tenía, you know, a history with drugs, and she started working as an exotic dancer, and then she started doing sex work. So a little bit of similarities there too. And también leímos que at some point she was living in a place that offered drug treatment. So she was seeking help, you know, but apparently this environment and the people around her in this environment who were also there for drug treatment were actually distracting her from getting better.
Y entonces en el octubre del 2016, ella tenía 33 años y ella estaba fuera de un restaurante Popeyes buscando trabajo. And that's when she goes with the guy for work. And at some point, she asks him to borrow his cell phone para mandarle un mensaje de texto a una amiga de ella diciendo que ella va a regresar muy pronto. And so she does just that. She gives her friend a quick text message and returns the phone.
Y la razón por qué Joanne no tenía un teléfono era porque ella se lo dejó a su amiga. So after being picked up at Popeyes, that was the last time she was seen.
And this guy that picked her up from Popeyes now has Joanne's phone number, right? Since she used it to text her friend. So, entonces, este hombre le llama al número, pero no dice nada. Joanne's friend then calls back, and he sends her straight to voicemail.
That's really scary because it's like your friend is with someone, right?
Yeah.
Y no tiene su teléfono because you have it. And the phone she just used a little bit a while ago. And then now this person is calling back in silence.
It's kind of weird that this person would call back y no decir nada.
It's kind of like creepy.
Yeah.
And scary. Entonces, for many reasons now, this friend reports Joanne missing.
Yeah, and I'm glad que she didn't just kind of sit on it or let it go, you know?
And then también, like, we kept, trying to research more on this because now there's a report, right, on this person. But we didn't find anything that detectives were doing, like an investigation. We didn't see any search parties or anything like that.
It's like if nobody was reported missing. And so after that, Joanne's case goes cold. I mean, they have no leads. They don't know who this man was, and it just stays as is. Y después de un mes de la desaparición de Joanne, en el noviembre de 2016, otra muchacha también desaparece. Y ella tenía el nombre de Sarah Butler. And of course, here's some background. Sarah was a longtime dancer at Premier Dance Theater, and she was also a lifeguard at the local YMCA. Ella y su familia vivían en Montclair, New Jersey, que, again, it's in the same area as the other two girls. Ella y su familia ya llevaban rato viviendo allí. They lived in the South End, pero con los años la ciudad was starting to get gentrified. But Sarah and her family still remained there.
As we researched her background, leímos que sus papás eran bien trabajadores. Her mother, Laverne Butler, worked with kids that were more privileged than hers, is how we read it in the articles. And I think that this is honestly really hard to be exposed to two different worlds in like such a close proximity. I've actually worked at two schools at the same time, and it's like the same city, Oakland. I was working up the hill, and like that school is like so many resources, and they had crazy activities and like crazy classes that I didn't even know existed until I was in college. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then I would, drive down the hill to work my second job. And it was a school that didn't have those resources. Yeah. And that was really tough on me because that's when I was working with special education, and that was the school that needed more resources. So I was just like my day living in two worlds. So I can see why she quoted this and why she said this. Yeah. That her background, like working with privileged kids, and then seeing that, her kids don't have that.
Yeah. And so her father, Victor Butler, trabajaba en un club making cocktails, and he also worked at a golfing course.
I think you're also exposed to a different world at a golfing course.
That is true, actually. Yeah.
It's definitely a hobby for people who are well off.
Yeah.
But yeah, going on. Entonces, as y'all can tell, Sarah comes from a really good home and a really good family that is, looking after her, and like they're, putting in effort into, her well-being, education, and everything, And Sarah had two sisters, Bastiana and Aaliyah, and las tres hermanas were in extracurricular activities. So like, as we said, her family, her parents are like doing as much as they can.
Yeah. They're trying to combine the both worlds, or, just simply giving their daughters the best. And Sarah took bartending classes before the legal age to bartend, which is kind of cool. I feel like not a lot of people pick that up as a hobby or as, but I think it would be a very cool and neat trait to have.
So going on with her background, she got her first car durante su primer año de colegio. She was actually attending Jersey City University. And then in the fall of 2016, Sarah was now a sophomore at New Jersey City University. And so now more present day, she is now a sophomore at this point in the story. And also more background, she is the first person to attend college in her family. And she had commuted the first year, and now being her second year, she was on campus. But she kind of struggled along with, her roommates.
Roommate troubles are never fun.
We definitely have some interesting roommate stories.
Yeah, we do. But I would say none of them are technically bad. But yes, very interesting. And so on November 22nd, Sarah was home for Thanksgiving break. And she took the family car to visit a friend. Y después de allí, ya nunca regresó esa mañana. Su familia, por supuesto que estaba bien preocupada por Sarah. You know, they hadn't heard from her. They don't know where she's at. And they were calling everyone and everywhere just trying to get a hold of her. But it seemed like no one knew where Sarah was.
Entonces, rápidamente se dieron cuenta que, algo estaba mal. Like, Sarah isn't the person to just up and go. Mm-hmm. And they knew that Sarah was missing and possibly in danger. So when all, like, this kind of settled down, like, the realization, they started to move quickly. Ellas empezaron a buscar por todos lados, por la ciudad. They reported her missing. They were just doing all the things.
And soon after searching, encontraron el carro de Sarah abandonado cerca de su casa, and part of her hair near the car. So to them, the situation was not looking good.
La hermana de Sarah, Pasiana, y dos amigas, Lamia Brown and Samantha Rivera, began to do their own detective work. And that's the kind of sister and the kind of friends you want to have, right?
Yeah,
they were getting to work right away. Mm-hmm. Entonces, they go onto Sarah's computer. And the good thing was that, they shared passwords with each other. So it was easy to like log into her accounts and just start looking and start reading through her messages. And what they found was shocking and extremely worrisome. And so they made it into her social media account and they found una aplicación que se llama Tagged. And this app connects people looking for friendships, romance, and also sex.
Okay, kind of unrelated, but there was a show on Awesomeness TV that also was kind of like very true crime. It was called Tag, and it was like a serial killer mystery that was on the loose, and he would tag you on like Instagram or whatever.
Oh.
Yeah. So when you said that, I was like, wait, yeah, but no, I remembered. So anyways, so it was on Tag that her sisters and friends found a young man going by the screen name Little Yacht Rock offer Sarah, whose screen name was Sarah Smile, $500 for sex. Y después de insistirle a Sarah, ella por fin acepta la oferta.
También leímos que, in her resistance to accept, mm-hmm. She even also kind of joked about like this person, meeting up with a stranger and this stranger potentially being a serial killer. Mm. So like that was in the messages. Entonces, since this was like kind of a really recent conversation and she's missing and it just doesn't look well, mm-hmm. La hermana y las amigas made a fake profile, todo con un plan. So the plan was to, message the same guy because they had a gut feeling about this guy. They thought that, something was there. Yeah. Entonces, they made this fake profile and they began talking to him. Y todo con la intención de que el muchacho les diga, like, let's meet up, mm-hmm. and all that, right? And so they did set something out to, like, meet up, and it was all agreed on both ends, right? This fake account and this guy. And right away in the conversations, he did bring up paying, this fake person, paying them for sex.
And he also agreed to meet them at Panera Bread Cafe in Montclair. But these girls did not show up alone. They began this plan alone, pero después de ver que Vidal les estaba contestando and to see that he basically fell into the trap, ellas se comunicaron con las autoridades. And so this meetup was going to happen alongside police. And the meetup did indeed happen. It happened on November 26, 2016. And when it happened, los detectives identifican al hombre atrás of the screen como Khalil Wheeler-Weaver. And he quickly becomes a suspect. And they bring him in for questions. And, he was answering them. He was being cooperative. And he did admit to meeting Sarah up that day. But he said that he left her safe and sound.
And so, they tried to get some background on Khalil. And they learned que tiene 20 años y que no tiene historia criminal. And they also find that he has family members in the police force. And at this point, they really have nothing on him, so they let him go.
And unfortunately, days later, Sarah was found on December 1st, 2016 in Eagle Rock Reservation. They were able to search this area porque su phone last pinged in this area. And when they get there, they were quick to uncover a body under some branches. Y cuando encontraron su cuerpo, descubrieron que she had been strangled with sweatpants.
Sarah's father was the person that identified her through pictures, and an autopsy revealed that she was murdered on November 22nd, 2016, which was el día que ella desapareció, after saying que iba a juntarse con un amigo.
And a quote from an organizer, Elaine Wayne, says, and we quote, "Sarah was happy, caring, and a kind young lady who was adored by her family and friends. A freshman in college, Sarah loved to dance and was a lifeguard for the YMCA. Sarah shined a light on this world that will never be able to replicate or be replaced."
Another quote, and this one is from one of her professors, and I quote, "I can close my eyes and recall how bright her face was. My goodness, she smiled a lot. She had an infectious energy." End quote.
It breaks my heart, like, when you hear quotes, you know, just showing, like, what a great person they were.
Mm-hmm. And, like, who they were and, like, what an impact they had on people.
Yeah.
And so now we are going to transfer over to how investigators connected these cases and got to the person responsible for these murders.
This brings us to Khalil Wheeler-Weaver. Y él fue arrestado por el asesinato de Sarah el 6 de diciembre de 2016. The charges in other cases were added after cell phone records tied him to the locations where each of these women were last seen, as well as their bodies were found.
And at this point, like, it's not looking well for him. Everything is piling up for him, you know? On December 5th, 2016, just the day before his arrest, a construction company comes across a body in a vacant home. This body was covered up in duct tape all around her mouth and face. And so when they take this body into an autopsy, it revealed that it was Joanne Brown, which was the person we were talking about earlier. She was outside the Popeyes and she didn't have a phone because her friend had it. And so this autopsy revealed that she was murdered on October 22nd, 2016. And so it is believed that the person who picked her up from Popeyes drove her to this abandoned house, raped her and killed her, wrapped her head in duct tape, and strangled her.
Me se me enchina la piel just to, like, think about how horrifying that sounds and to think about how that is what actually someone went through.
Mm-hmm.
Scary.
So at this point in the investigation, there's 3 bodies and they're all being connected to Khalil because of cell phone records. And also, while we did more research on this case, también leímos que, you know, there was another woman that met Khalil, and this woman had a lot to say about him. She escaped him and made it out alive to testify against him.
You know, it's crazy. I know we don't like to compare cases, but this is, like, reminding me a lot of the Cleveland Strangler, right? How there's, like, woman on woman, and then, like, there's some that got away and we're able to talk about it. But we are glad that in this case, Tiffany Taylor was able to get away from Khalil. So a little bit about her. She grew up in Jersey City, and we read that she had a rough childhood and she witnessed 2 boyfriends get murdered, which is a lot to deal with. And, you know, she was in college at some point, but she did end up getting pregnant at 20. And so after that, she went into sex work.
Entonces, Tiffany conoció a Khalil porque tenían un amigo mutual, and, you know, she thought that he was pretty cool as a first impression. And Khalil, at some point, you know, made it clear that he was interested in just sex. And also, Tiffany wasn't really interested in that. Like, she said that she was 10 years older than him and she just wasn't interested in anything. But he insisted and kept on insisting. And so she finally agreed, you know, to, you know, go with it. But it was really just all a trick. She didn't really plan to do anything with him. All she really planned was, you know, to take his money. So, you know, they met up and everything. She was going to go with her plan and just tricking him. So she played it off by saying that she needed to grab something from her car, but she never came back. Entonces, after this, Tiffany and Khalil, you know, they kind of stopped talking. And then at some point, Tiffany got pregnant again, but she ended up homeless, living in a car.
And in November 2016, she began getting harassing messages. Entonces ella cambió su número, pero los mensajes continuaron. She had no idea who was sending these messages or how they were getting a hold of her new number.
And so at this time in her life, Tiffany se mudó con su mamá into a motel room. And there she was working for the owner of the hotel doing jobs related to cocaine.
Along with, some of the jobs that she picked up, the messages were still coming in. Y aunque no estamos muy segura de qué decían los mensajes, we want to infer that it was something about meeting up, maybe paying her for sex or something along those lines. And so since she was in desperate need of money, she agreed to those messages that were coming in. And, her game plan was just vamos a ir, nos van a pagar y nos vamos, kind of done deal, But that was not the case.
On November 15th, 2016, this man shows up to the hotel all covered with a mask. But she chose to ignore it because it was cold, so I guess she was just trying to make sense out of it.
Taylor said that she didn't recognize the person at the time when they made up at the motel because, again, he was wearing a mask.
And they started driving to find a place when she suddenly was struck in the head.
He then handcuffed her, covered her mouth with duct tape, and raped her in the back of the seat while strangling her. She repeatedly lost consciousness during the sexual assault. And, this is, by the way, Taylor testifying to everything.
Which is another layer to it, to be real living this at court,
Yeah.
But also testifying so, this person can be locked up, But back to her story. After this, he removed his mask y le preguntó si lo conocía. And by her surprise, she did know who he was. And it was no other than Khalil Wheeler-Weaver. And ella le dijo que la llevara para atrás porque estaba embarazada. And he responded, I know. He knew she was pregnant, but he did all this. And
sorry, it's just, what? I'm lost at words. Why would you want to purposely hurt a pregnant woman?
Yeah.
Terrified for her life, Taylor convinced Khalil to drive her back to her motel by telling him she left her cell phone there with their conversation and that they would connect him back to the crime.
Entonces, él dijo que sí, que la iba a llevar para atrás to the hotel room to get the phone. But while they drove back, he complained how no girl wanted him unless he paid them. Y entonces, cuando ya llegaron al motel, Taylor managed to lock him out of the room and dialed 911.
I think by him making that comment about how no one wants him unless he pays, I think that's saying a lot, that's there, internalized. And so through a little window in the room, she showed him that she was no longer handcuffed. And that's when he left.
Entonces, como había dicho, ella llamó al 911, pero they didn't take her serious.
Here's this woman calling saying that she's in trouble, and on top of that, she has a name and she's giving them a name. And the police knew all of his information, but they decided, it's a choice. They decided not to do anything.
Super frustrating, right? Y luego, lo que leímos también after this is also even more, it's just one thing after the other. Entonces, we later find out que Khalil just sat in his car, watched the police arrive, and that was it. He just sat back and watched.
That's crazy to me.
And so this whole thing that we just talked about between Khalil and Tiffany, this happened on November 15th, 2016.
And a couple of days later, on November 22nd, he then murders Sarah Butler, the young woman that we talked about earlier, and how her family was the one that arranged a whole setup with Khalil.
And this is what makes me truly upset, because if they had just taken Tiffany serious, then
Sarah would have been alive.
Sarah would have been alive. She wouldn't have crossed paths with Khalil. And so this is really frustrating because every case is important. And in this case, if they would have just listened, then so much would have been avoided.
At the trial, jurors watched the hotel security camera footage showing how Tiffany managed to escape her captor by slamming and locking the door while Khalil was waiting outside. And this is a quote that Tiffany shared, after everything that happened. She said, and we quote, "My whole life is different. I don't wear makeup anymore. I don't have friends. I'm always paranoid, but I'm happy to still be here." End quote. And I feel like, I don't know, like an event like that, it has to shake you up. It has to.
This definitely speaks volumes of like the trauma and the change.
And then even after the fact of like when, we fast forward to now that we know that Khalil was this serial killer. Imagine like how she feels now.
Yeah, it's a lot. And like, I can't even
describe it. Yeah.
And so, in the trials, they are piling up on evidence. And also they start looking into Khalil's search history. And so they gathered information on how Khalil was searching up on how to create drugs to make people unconscious while using household cleaners. So they're just adding a lot to their evidence here. Also, también, they tracked his location on his phone, and, they were able to get the evidence of him being at the address of the house just before the fire. And then after driving away, and how he circled back to watch the firefighters fight this fire. And this, since we're talking about multiple women, I'm talking about Robin West.
And Khalil did speak out at some point. Y él dijo, and we quote, "My heart goes out to the families. However, I was not the person who committed these crimes. I was set up. I was lied on and framed by the prosecutor's office."
And Tiffany had something to say about this, right? Like hearing in court that Khalil is saying that he is not responsible. She definitely had a comment to say, and I quote, "As far as him saying that he still didn't do it, it makes me feel like he has no type of remorse about it at all. Like he hasn't even shed a tear about anything. So he's not sorry at all about what he did. I'm over 100% sure it was him." End quote.
I mean, she was there. Like she was a survivor. She experienced that. It was him. There's no way. And I agree with her. Like, as long as someone is not admitting to the crimes y pidiendo perdón, you have no remorse.
I agree.
And so 5 years later, Khalil, que ahora tiene 25, fue condenado a 160 años en prisión for murdering Sarah Butler, who was 20 years old, Robin West, who was 19, and Joanne Brown, who was 33. He was also charged for kidnapping, sexually assaulting, and attempting to murder Tiffany Taylor. All four were attacked from August to November in 2016. So just in the span of months.
And as we can tell, Khalil had, a similar target across his victims. He would set up meeting with them while asking for sex, and then, he would attack them, wrap their faces in tape and strangle them with something. And that's something that we saw throughout the episode about his pattern.
Y también, como muchos otros serial killers, Khalil Wheeler-Weaver targeted marginalized women.
In November 2021, una autopsia was done on a body that was found on April 19th, 2019. And these were decomposed remains of a young woman that was discovered in an old carriage house on Main Street in Orange, New Jersey. In 2021, they made a discovery of a person that went missing in 2016. Mawa Dumbia went missing on October 7th, 2016, and she was only 15 years old. Entonces, this discovery was made in November 2021 because of an autopsy done on a body that was found on April 19th, 2019. And the decomposed body was of a young woman that was discovered in an old carriage house on Main Street in Orange, New Jersey.
Mawa had been killed by strangulation, which kind of fit the description of Khalil's other victims.
Yeah. And then investigators had digital evidence that showed Khalil contacted Mawa for sex that same day that she disappeared.
They had evidence that Khalil went to Mawa's house first and then the vacant carriage house. Eventually, Khalil was charged with her murder as well. And just to reiterate, Khalil committed his crimes over an 88-day period in 2016.
All in all, We are glad that Khalil Wheeler-Weaver is now paying the crime that he did. And we want to emphasize like how impactful and like unfortunate this case is. And again, how frustrating it is that detectives dismissed cases, and it resulted in a person going on a series of murders. This is why we also want to include, if you or someone you know has been sexually assaulted, please contact National Sexual Assault Hotline at 1-800-656-4673.
Si usted o alguien que conoce ha sido agredido sexualmente, comuníquense con la línea directa nacional de agreso sexual al 1-800-656-4673. Again, just if anyone out there listening needs this, we definitely encourage you all to call.
Thank you so much for listening to today's episode. Gracias a todos por escuchar este episodio esta semana. We are extremely grateful for y'all tuning in every week. It means so much to us.
You know, it's also dedication. Like, yeah, we put an episode every week, but y'all come every week. So,
yeah.
You know, it works both ways.
Yes, it works both ways, which is honestly the reason why we're
still here.
Yeah. Yeah. It helps keep us motivated in our podcast mission. So thank you so much, and we'll see you all next week.